Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Today we have another three more stories compilation of people experiencing unusual things all around the country. This is basically focused on Philippines. So the first story was coming from, I believe, Saraya, Quezon. Second one was from Siquijor, and the third one was from Cebu. So we have really great, stories coming from Luzon and Visayas today. And you might be hearing a couple of cats' voice and noises in the background because my cats are awake at this time of night upon recording. But let's start and jump into the first story. And before I do that, this story is actually very interesting because I don't know if you guys have heard or have watched the story about the trumpet that was heard last 2020, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And there was like a huge trumpet sound heard all around the world, not just in our country, but all around the world. I personally haven't heard it myself, but for those people that lived in rural area or people that lived in a place where it's much more quieter than the city, they did mention that a lot of people have heard it. And this is one of those accounts. So basically, this is indeed 100% truth because I can guarantee this was like posted all over the news, all around the country. It's not just in the Philippines, but all around the country. People have heard about this unusual trumpet sound, and this is something that, like, no one has ever solved before. So we're gonna jump into this first story. I actually rewrite. I rewrote. I didn't know how to speak English anymore. I rewrote the story and make it a bit more, how I would like it to be explained if I were to tell you the story myself. Thank you so much for the story here. Her name is Christina, coming from Saraya, Quezon. I call this one the trumpet heard all around the world. It was a very hot day. That kind of heat that just settles deep in your bones. Even moving a little felt like a chore. Saraya, Quezon is a usually quiet town. The only drama we ever had was the occasional rooster crowing before dawn or the kids yelling as they chased each other through the dusty streets. But this day, there was this silence everywhere. It was an emptiness that felt really weird, especially since it was usually buzzing with crickets and cicadas. 3 days had passed since this crazy loud trumpet noise, and just thinking about it still gave me chills. It wasn't your average trumpet. No way. This sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. Imagine the strongest foghorn you've ever heard, times 1,000, like a sound that shook you to your core. It was like a vibration that seemed to shake the world itself. It's like one deafening blast and then nothing. Just everyone in town looking confused up at the clear sky, trying to figure out where that unearthly sound came from. Of course, the scientists had their explanations. They said it was solar flares or some weird atmospheric thing, but I knew better. The way the dogs were howling like crazy, the birds just falling out of the sky like rocks, the carabao running wild through Farmer Pablo's field. This wasn't natural. This wasn't the first strange thing to happen here either. Pablo. Kind of noticed that Pablo's really, just to interrupt the story, really famous or, kind of usual name in the Philippines, especially in the Luzon area. I've also had like story before that has someone named Pablo as well that also own a field. Very interesting. Anyway, this wasn't the strange thing to happen here either. This same blaring trumpet noise had happened back in 2020, and then again last year on August 12th. It was starting to feel like a creepy countdown, a reminder that something wasn't right with the world. What if everything we thought we knew, everything we believed in, was totally made up? What if there were things out there, like super powerful things that we can't understand, that had been watching us all along? I just couldn't shake this feeling of unease. And as the afternoon sun started to set, painting the sky with orange and red, I decided to take a walk to clear my head that day. And I usually walked around the edge of our farm. It was like a routine I got from my grandfather. The air got cooler, and as I walked deeper into the shade of banana trees, the leaves rustled in the gentle breeze, whispering secrets. Then, all of a sudden, I saw a flicker of light. It wasn't the steady glow of firefly, but this bright blue orb, unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was just hanging out above the tree line, past the farmer's field. My heart was racing, and I felt like a cold shiver run down my spine. As I squinted, even more lights appeared, and a bunch of them flying around erratically in the sky, like they zipped around super fast, leaving streaks of light that faded after a moment. Unlike any fireworks I'd ever seen, or any drone, these lights were silent, like no whistling, no crackling, nothing. Just an eerie silence that made the whole thing even weirder. Then, in the blink of an eye, the lights started coming down, like they swooped down, weaving between the thick trees bordering the farm. For a moment, they were completely gone, swallowed by the darkness. But then, just as suddenly, they reappeared, like flying up and hovering right above the tree line, and like a loose circle, bathing the clearing in the strange blue light. It was so quiet. It was so deafeningly quiet. It was suffocating even, like the air itself crackled with this unseen energy. What I felt back then was unusual because I remember my skin prickled, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. But it's not just about having goosebumps. It's like there's electrifying energy on the air that's been giving me that prickly, unusual feeling. It felt like reality itself was getting thin, like it could bend. I watched, frozen with fear and strange kind of curiosity, as one of the lights broke away from the group and it slowly came down right towards me, hovering just a few meters above the ground. I can clearly see its size. It was gigantic, way bigger than my whole farmhouse. The light it gave off was so bright that it didn't even even cast a shadow at all, like it defied the laws of light or something. And for a moment, I swear, the air shimmered around the thing like it was sparkling. Reality seemed to ripple, like the surface of a pond when you throw a pebble in it. Cold sweat was covering my entire body, and I was so afraid. I felt fear. At that moment, it hit me. What if all those stories, all the myths, and all the legends that have been passed down for generations had a sliver of truth to them? What if the tales of gods and flying chariots weren't just made up stories, but messed up memories of encounters like this one? That night was something that I cannot forget in my entire life, which changes my entire prospects, entire mindset, entire belief. Where the religious text we held sacred, the very foundation of our beliefs, true? Or is it just confused human beings that have seen something unusual and have claimed it was from the gods? And wow, this story just took out the words from my mouth. The reason why I said that is because I myself thought of the same thing, but I didn't have any experience, like any UFO experience like this before, and I hope not, because that would be very scary. But there's also a part of me that's very, very interested to see this myself, like personally. But I do believe that what we are learned to believe, like what we, all with all due respect to all of the religions out there, I think it shouldn't be close-minded. Like, we know for a fact that we're not the only potential human beings in this universe, all of the universes, and there's a possibility that there's actually like an intelligent species out there far more advanced than us, and we just cannot rule out that fact. And I know for very fact myself that if you look at that reason or change your mindset on that type of perspective, then all of those stories that we've heard from our ancestors, from the religion, it wouldn't really make sense. And sometimes even felt like, if it is true, that it could be, accounts of people experiencing something unusual that they might have tagged as the actions of gods or people from heavens. Imagine having to see like an entire being coming from the sky with very advanced technology, and we thought that it's something like gods or something, goddesses. We may never know, right? Well, that's for me. Food for your thought, people. That's our first story. Let's jump into the second one. The second one came from story from Siquijor. It's coming from Elena or Elena. How do I read the name? I titled this as the Balete tree of Siquijor before its fame. My Lola always warned me about the Balete tree at the edge of our farm. Diyos ko po, apo, she'd say, her voice trembling slightly. That tree holds a secret best left undisturbed, she said. Siquijor back then in 1978 wasn't the tourist haven it is now. It was quite a very serene and quiet island, shrouded in whispers of magic and hidden worlds. One sizzling afternoon, boredom gnawed at me like a persistent mosquito, and my friends were busy helping their families and friends, and I was left to my own devices. Like, my Lola's warning about the Balete tree echoed in my head, but the heat and the drowning cicadas dulled their impact. The tree was a magnificent sight, its roots a tangled web that stretched across the ground like a sleeping giant. Curiosity tugged at me at that time. I ignored my Lola's voice in my head, and I crawled under a low-hanging root, like a cool, damp breath washing over me as I entered the hidden space beneath the tree. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the mossy ground. It was quiet, like it was unusually quiet. It sent shivers down my spine. I remember a flicker of movement caught my eye. Nestled amongst the roots was a small, intricately carved wooden door. It was very small, but barely wide enough than my hand. I jumped back, heart hammering against my ribs, and I said, "Hello?" I stammered, my voice barely a squeak. "Do not be afraid," the voice soothed. "This is a place of passage, a gateway to another." A gateway? My mind raced. Was this one of the magical things my Lola used to warn me about? But the voice was gentle, it was not menacing. So I cautiously reached out and pushed the small door open. A wave of coolness washed over me as I peeked inside. Beyond the doorway wasn't darkness, but a shimmering light, swirling with colors that I've never seen before. A gasp escaped my lips. "There's a whole other world in there," I whispered, barely daring to believe my eyes. The voice that I'm hearing was a little low, but I know for a fact that it chuckled. "There are many worlds, little one, but this one is not meant for you. Not yet." Well, I felt a bit disappointed at that time. Just as quickly as the light appeared, it vanished. Like it replaced the familiar sight of the tree roots, like the door, that small door wasn't there at all. So I crawled back out, and there was a strange sense of wonder and a tinge of frustrations, like lingering within me. I returned home at that time. I couldn't bring myself to tell my grandmother or Lola about the experience, and part of me feared her scolding, but a bigger part of me felt like I'd stumbled something that it should be considered as a secret, something I wasn't meant to share. It was way back 1978, and you must have noticed that time flew so fast, like years passed, and Siquijor slowly gained its reputation as a mystical island. So I felt like this could be no greater time than now to share this amazing memories that I had. The Balete tree became a tourist attraction. It was adorned with colorful ribbons and trinkets, but whenever I see it, a memory flickers. A doorway, a voice, and a world waiting to be explored. Maybe someday, when the time is right, I'll return and find the courage to step through. Wow. Well, I didn't get a chance to visit Siquijor's Balete tree before, but I've heard it was a spectacle. Now I kind of regret it. Why I didn't get a chance to go and visit the Balete tree myself. We've tried cave, visiting the caves, going to the beach, and going to different type of places aside from the Balete tree. That was really bad of us. Maybe next time we get to experience a Balete tree, but this was a story way back in 1978, you guys. I bet Siquijor was such a beautiful place, like untouched and, mystical and mysterious back then. Because last year we visited Siquijor, it was so amazing. Certainly I'll go back. Great, so we are now down to our last story. This story came from Cebu. The person is called Marco or Marco, was it? This was actually just a screenshot of a photo, like handwritten letter that was sent to us through email. So let's just go on ahead. I actually titled the story The Horror of Cebu's Temple of Leah. Now, this is very interesting because we all know Temple of Leah is one of the beautiful places to visit in Cebu. The Cebu sun beat down mercilessly as my taxi pulled up on the gates of the Temple of Leah. I'd heard whispers about the place. A sprawling mansion built by a heartbroken man in memory of his deceased wife. Intrigued by the tragic romance in the mansion's architectural mishmash, I decided to pay my respects. The entrance was grand, a towering replica of Roman Colosseum guarding the driveway. Eerie silence hung in the air, broken only by chirping of unseen cicadas. The driver, a friendly local named June, eyed the place nervously. "You sure about this, man?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "They say strange things happen here after dark." I chuckled, brushing off his concerns. "It's just a love story, right?" I said, handing him the fare. He gave a hesitant nod, but before driving away, he kind of looked back at me, probably doubting, thinking second time around to bring me out, since it's getting dark here. But eventually, he left me alone at the entrance. The walk to the mansion was unsettling. Grotesque statues of mythical creatures lined the path, and their withered faces seemingly leering at me. The air grew colder as I approached the mansion, a vast structure that defied any specific architectural style. Gothic arches sat incongruously, beside a Moorish courtyards, and gargoyles perched atop Grecian columns. Wow, it must have been like a beautiful spectacle. I haven't been there. Anyway, going back to the story. Pushing open the heavy oak doors, I was greeted by a thick layer of dust and an oppressive silence. Sunlight barely penetrated the grime-coated windows, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the dusty floors. The only sound was the echo of my footsteps on the cold marble floor. As I ventured deeper, the air grew heavier, thick with like an unseen presence. A portrait of a beautiful woman, presumably Leah, hung crookedly on a wall. Her once vibrant colors were faded, and her eyes seeming to follow me as I moved. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind me. My heart lurched. I spun around, searching for the source of the sound. Nothing. Just the unsettling silence, but this time heavier. I was so afraid. The mansion felt colder, the air thick with a cloying sweetness like a rotting flowers. Then I heard it, a soft, mournful sigh that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Panic clawed at my throat. This wasn't a love story anymore. This was something else entirely. I stumbled back, adrenaline surging through me, and every creak, every groan echoed in the cavernous halls, fueling my fear. I broke into a run, like a very desperate run, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere. I burst out of the mansion and a gasp for fresh air. The sunlight was harsh as it was, felt like a lifeline. I didn't look back, didn't dare to. I just run, like not stopping until I reached the main road where a waiting tricycle offered a ride back to civilization. Back in the bustling city, the memory of the Temple of Leah lingered. The weight of the experience, the silence, the mournful sigh, it all felt so real, yet undeniably real. Was it just an overactive imagination fueled by local stories? Or was there something more, like a heartbroken spirit forever trapped within the walls of the mansion, forever searching for solace? I never went back to the Temple of Leah. The image of the mansion bathed in an eerie glow under the midday sun remains etched in my memory. It was a love story that turned chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, and their secrets buried beneath layers of dust and forgotten memories over a beautiful scenery. That is the end of the last story for today. I actually tried my best to translate the story from Bisaya to English so that you guys can understand, but basically it is what it was explained back then. From the letter that was sent to me was a screenshot or a photo that was handwritten coming from our letter sender. Thank you so much. I've never been to Temple of Leah. Let me know if you guys have seen it and can confirm what this writer or a letter sender that mentioned that there was like a portrait of a beautiful woman, presumably Leah, and it was because a man was heartbroken and he created this beautiful architectural mansion because he missed his wife, presumably. Very interesting. We may never know. It could have been real, could be an elaborate hoax. You decide. That's the end of today's story. Toodaloo.